Hi, friends. Happy Easter. I hope you're all well. I voted today. Um, Reminder to Canadian friends, you got another, well, I mean, I don't suppose many, unless you're, unless you're on the West Coast, you don't have much time left for advanced polling today. But even if you didn't make it out this weekend, you can vote advanced polling at any of the at your local Election Canada office all this week. And of course, there's Election Day on Monday. So, yes, I don't know if anyone watching is actually Canadian, but yeah, it's a beautiful day to exercise your right to have your say, and I did. So, there we go. I voted for the incumbent, who's an NDP. Not thrilled with the leadership of the party, but I like her, so I went with her. So, hi Jules, hi Alma, hi Julie. So, today is a big day for Pride and Prejudice reading because, yeah, a bunch of big stuff happens. It's the penultimate reading day, and it's really climax. And then tomorrow we'll be reading the denouement or denouement, as you wrong about fans know it. So yeah, I will get on with chapter 56. One morning, about a week after Bingley's engagement with Jane had been formed, as he and the females of the family were sitting together in the dining room, their attention was suddenly drawn to the window by the sound of a carriage, and they perceived a chaise and four driving up the lawn. I wonder who that could be. It was too early in the morning for visitors, and besides, the equipage did not answer to any of the neighbors, to that of any of the neighbors. The horses were post, and neither carriage nor the livery of the servants who preceded it were familiar to them. As it was certain, however, that somebody was coming, Bingley instantly prevailed on Miss Bennet to avoid the confinement of such an intrusion, and walk away with him into the shrubbery. They both set off, and the conjectures of the remaining three continued, though with little satisfaction, till the door was thrown open, and their visitor entered. It was Lady Catherine de Bourgh. They were, of course, all intended to be surprised, but their astonishment was beyond their expectation, and on the part of Mrs. Bennet and Kitty, though she was perfectly unknown to either of them, felt even inferior to what Elizabeth felt. She entered the room with an air of more than usual ungraciousness, made no other reply to Elizabeth's salutations than a slight inclination of the head, and sat down without saying a word. Elizabeth had mentioned her name to her mother on her ladyship's entrance, though no request of introduction had been made. Mrs. Bennet, all astonishment, though flattered by having a guest of such high importance, received her with the utmost politeness. After sitting for a moment in silence, she said very stiffly to Elizabeth, "I hope you are very well, Miss Bennet. That lady, I suppose, is your mother." Elizabeth replied very concisely that she was. "And that, I suppose, is one of your sisters." "Yes, madam," said Mrs. Bennet, delighted to speak to a Lady Catherine. "She is my youngest but one. My youngest of all is lately married, and my eldest is somewhere about the grounds walking with a young man who I believe will soon become part of the family." "You have a very small park here," returned Lady Catherine after a short silence. "It is nothing in comparison of Rosings, my lady, I dare say, but I assure you it is much larger than Sir William Lucas's." "This must be a most inconvenient sitting room for the evening, in summer. The windows are full west." Mrs. Bennet assented to her that they never sat there after dinner, and then added, "May I take the liberty of asking your ladyship whether you left Mr. and Mrs. Collins well?" "Yes, very well. I saw them the night before last." Elizabeth now expected that she would produce a letter for her from Charlotte, as it seemed the only probable motive for her calling, but no letter appeared, and she was completely puzzled. Mrs. Bennet, with great civility, begged her ladyship to take some refreshment, but Lady Catherine was very resolutely, and not very politely, declined eating anything, and then rising up, said to Elizabeth, "Miss Bennet, there seems to be a prettyish kind of little wilderness on the side of your lawn. I should be glad to take a turn in it, if you would favour me with your company." "Go on, my dear," cried her mother. show her ladyship about the different walks. I think she'll be pleased with the hermitage. Elizabeth obeyed, and running into her own room for her parasol, attended her noble guests downstairs. As they passed through the hall, Lady Catherine opened the doors into the dining parlour and drawing room, and pronounced them, after a short survey, to be decent-looking rooms, and walked on. Her carriage remained at the door, and Elizabeth saw that her waiting woman was in it. They proceeded in silence along the gravel walk that led to the copse. Elizabeth was determined to make no effort for conversation with a woman who was now more than usually insolent and disagreeable. "How could I ever think her like her nephew?" she said, as she looked in her face. As soon as they entered the copse, Lady Catherine began in the following manner. "You can be at no loss, Miss Bennet, to understand the reason for my journey hither. Your heart, your own conscience, must tell you why I come." Elizabeth looked with unaffected astonishment. "Indeed, you are mistaken, madam. I have not been at all able to account for the honour of seeing you here." "Miss Bennet," replied her ladyship in an angry tone, "you ought to know that I am not to be trifled with. But however insincere you choose to be, you shall not find me so. My character has ever been celebrated for its sincerity and its frankness, and in cause of such a moment as this, I am certainly not going to depart from it. A report of the most alarming nature has reached me 2 days ago. I was told, not only that your sister was on the point of being most advantageously married, but that you, Miss Elizabeth Bennet, would in all likelihood be soon afterwards united to my nephew, my own nephew, Mr. Darcy. Though I know it must be a scandalous falsehood, I thought I would not injure him so much as to suppose the truth of it could be possible, and I instantly resolved on setting off for this place that I might make my sentiments known to you." "If you believed it to be impossible to be true," said Elizabeth, colouring with astonishment and disdain, "I wonder why you took the trouble of coming so far. What would your ladyship propose by it?" "At once to insist on having such a report universally contradicted." "Your coming to Longbourn to see my family," said Elizabeth coolly, "will rather be a confirmation of it, if indeed such a report exists." "If you pretend to be ignorant of it, has it been industriously circulated by yourself? Do you not know that such a report is spread abroad?" "I never heard it was." "And can you likewise declare that there is no foundation for it?" "I do not pretend to possess equal frankness with your ladyship. You may ask questions, which I choose not to answer." "This is not to be borne, Miss Bennet. I insist on being satisfied. Has my nephew made you an offer of marriage?" "Your ladyship has declared it too impossible." "It ought to be so. It must be so, while he retains the use of his reason. But your arts and allurements in moments of infatuation have made him forget what he owes himself and all his family. You may have drawn him in." "If I had, I should be the last person to confess it." "Miss Bennet, do you know who I am? I have not been accustomed to such language as this. I am almost the nearest relation he has in the world, and I am entitled to know all his nearest concerns." "But you are not entitled to know mine, nor will such behaviour as this induce me to be explicit." "Let me be rightly understood. This match which you have the presumption to aspire can never take place. No, never. Mr. Darcy is engaged to my daughter. Now, what do you have to say?" "Only this, that he is so. You can have no reason to suppose that he is likely to make me an offer." Lady Catherine hesitated for a moment, and then replied, "The engagement between them is of a peculiar kind. From their infancy they have been intended for each other. It was the favourite wish of his mother as well as hers, while in their cradles we planned the union. And now, at the moment when both of sisters' wishes would be accomplished in their marriage, to be prevented by a young woman of inferior birth, of no importance in the world, and wholly unallied to the family. Do you pay no regard to the wishes of his friends? To his tacit engagement with Mr. Berg? Are you lost to every feeling of propriety and delicacy? Have you not heard me say that from his earliest hours he was destined for his cousin?" "Yes, and I have heard it before. But what is that to me? If there is no other objection to my marrying your nephew, I shall certainly not not be kept from it, by knowing that his mother and aunt wished him to marry Mr. Berg. You both did as much as you could in planning the marriage. Its completion depended on others. If Mr. Darcy is neither honoured nor inclined to confide in his cousin, why not? If Mr. Darcy by neither honour nor inclination is confined to his cousin, why not can he make another choice? And if I am that choice, why may I not accept him? Because honour, decorum, prudence, nay, interest forbid it. Yes, Miss Bennet, interest, for do not expect to be noticed by his family or friends. If you wilfully act against the inclinations of all, you will be censured, slighted, and despised by every one connected with him. Your alliance would be a disgrace. Your name will never be even mentioned by any of us. These would be heavy misfortunes indeed, replied Elizabeth, but the wife of Mr. Darcy may have such extraordinary sources of happiness necessarily attached to her situation that she could, upon the whole, have no cause to repine. Obstinate, headstrong girl, I am ashamed of you. Is this your gratitude for my attention to you last spring? Is nothing due to me on that score? Let us sit down. You are to understand, Miss Bennet, that I came here with a determined resolution of carrying my purpose. Nor will I be dissuaded from it. I have not been used to submit to any person's whims. I have not been in the habit of brooking disappointment. That will make your ladyship's situation at present more pitiable, but it has no effect on me. I will not be interrupted. Hear me in silence. My daughter and my nephew are formed for each other. They are descended on the maternal line from the same noble line, and on the father's from respectable, honourable, and ancient though untitled families. Their fortune on both sides is splendid. They are destined for each other by the voice of every member of their respected houses. And what is to divide them? The upstart pretensions of a young woman without family, connections, or fortune? Is this to be endured? It must not be so, shall not be. If you were sensible of your own good, you would not wish to quit the sphere in which you have been brought up. In marrying your nephew, I shall not consider myself as quitting that sphere. He is a gentleman, I am a gentleman's daughter. So far we are equal. True, but you are a gentleman's daughter. But who was your mother? Who are your uncles and aunts? Do not imagine me ignorant of their condition. Whatever my connections may be, said Elizabeth, if your nephew does not object to them, they can be nothing to you. Tell me once and for all, are you engaged to him? Though Elizabeth would not, for the mere purpose of obliging Lady Catherine, have answered this question, she could not but say, after a moment's deliberation, I am not. Lady Catherine seemed pleased. And will you promise me never to enter into such an engagement? I will make no promise of the kind. Miss Bennet, I am shocked, astonished. I expected to find a more reasonable young woman, but do not deceive yourself into belief that I will ever recede. I shall not go away till you have given me the assurance that I require. And I certainly never shall give it. I am not intimidated into anything so wholly unreasonable. Your ladyship wants Mr. Darcy to marry your daughter. But would my giving you the wished-for promise make their marriage at all more probable? Suppose him to be attached to me, would my refusing to accept his hand make him wish to bestow it on his cousin? Allow me to say, Lady Catherine, that the argument with which you have supported this extraordinary application have been as frivolous as the application was ill-judged. You have widely mistaken my character if you think I can be worked on by such persuasions as these. How far your nephew might approve of your interference is his affair. I cannot tell. But you have certainly no right to concern yourself in mine. I must beg, therefore, to be importuned on the subject no further. Not so hasty, if you please. I am by no means done. To all the objections I have urged, I have yet another to add. I am no stranger to the particulars of your youngest sister's infamous elopement. I know it all. That the young man's marrying her was a patched-up business at the expense of your father and uncle. And is such a girl to be my nephew's sister? Is her husband, the son of his late father's steward, to be his brother? Heaven and earth, what are you thinking? Are the shades of Pemberley to be thus polluted? You can now have nothing further to say, she resentfully answered. You have insulted me in every possible method. I must beg to return to the house. She rose as she spoke. Lady Catherine rose also, and they turned back. Her ladyship was highly incensed. You have no regard, then, for the honour and credit of my nephew? Unfeeling, selfish girl. Do you not consider that a connection with you must disgrace him in the eyes of everybody? Lady Catherine, I have nothing further to say. You know my sentiments. You are then resolved to have him? I have said no such thing. I am only resolved to act in the manner which, in my own opinion, constitutes my happiness, without reference to you, or to any person so wholly unconnected with me. It is well you refuse, then, to oblige me. You refuse to obey the claims of duty, honour, and gratitude. You are determined to ruin him in the opinion of all his friends, and make him the contempt of the world. Neither duty, nor honour, nor gratitude, replied Elizabeth, have any possible claim on me in the present instance. No principle of either would be violated by my marriage with Mr. Darcy. And with regard to the resentment of his family or the indignation of the world, if the former were excited by my marrying him, it would not give me one moment's concern. And in the world, in general, I would have too much sense to join in. And the world in general would have too much sense to join in their scorn. And this is your real opinion? This is your final resolve? Very well. I shall know how to act. Do not imagine, Miss Bennet, that your ambition will ever be gratified. I came to you, I hoped to find you reasonable, but depend on it, I will carry my point. In this manner, Lady Catherine talked on, till they were at the door of her carriage. When, turning hastily around, she added, I take no leave of you, Miss Bennet. I send no compliments to your mother. You deserve no such attention. I am most seriously displeased. Elizabeth made no answer, and without attempting to persuade her ladyship to return into the house, walked quietly into it herself. She heard the carriage drive away as she proceeded upstairs. Her mother impatiently met her at the door of the dressing-room to ask why Lady Catherine would not come again and rest herself. She did not choose it, said her daughter. She would go. She is a very fine-looking woman, and calling here was prodigiously civil. If she only came for, I suppose, to tell us the Collinses were well. She is on her road somewhere, I dare say, and so passing through Meryton. Though she might as well call on you. I suppose she had nothing in particular to say to you, Lizzie? Elizabeth was forced to give into a little falsehood here, for to acknowledge the substance of their conversation was impossible. That was fun. Okay. Chapter 57. The discomposure of spirits which this extraordinary visit threw Elizabeth into could not easily overcome, nor could she for many hours learn to think of it less incessantly. Lady Catherine, it appeared, had actually taken the trouble of this journey from Rosings for the sole purpose of breaking off her supposed engagement with Mr. Darcy. It was a rational scheme, to be sure, but from what report of their engagement could it originate? Elizabeth was at a loss to imagine, till she recollected that his being an intimate friend of Bingley, and her being the sister of Jane, was enough at the time when the expectation of one wedding made everybody eager for another, to supply the idea. She had not herself forgotten to feel that the marriage of her sister must bring them more frequently together, and her neighbours at Lucas Lodge, therefore, for though their communication with the Collinses, for through their communication with the Collinses, the report she concluded had reached Lady Catherine, had only set that down as almost certain and immediate, which she had looked forward to as possible at some future time. In resolving Lady Catherine's expressions, however, she could not help feeling some uneasiness as to the possible consequence of her persisting in this interference. From what she had said of her resolution to prevent their marriage, it occurred to Elizabeth that she must mediate an application to her nephew, and how he might take a similar representation of the evils attached to a connection with her, she dared not pronounce. She knew not the exact degree of his affection for his aunt, or his dependence on her judgment, but it was natural to suppose that he thought much higher of her ladyship than she could do, and it was certain that, in enumerating the miseries of a marriage with one, whose immediate connections were so unequal to his own, his aunt would address him on his weakest side. With his notions of dignity, he would probably feel that the arguments, which to Elizabeth had appeared weak and ridiculous, contained much good sense and solid reasoning. If he had been wavering before as to what he should do, which often seemed likely, the advice and entreaty of so near a relation might settle every doubt, and determine him at once to be as happy as dignity unblemished could make him. In that case he would return no more. Lady Catherine might see him on her way through town, and his engagement to Bingley of coming again to Netherfield might give way. If therefore any excuse for not keeping his promise should come to his friend within a few days, she added, I shall know how to understand it. I shall give over every expectation, every wish of his consistency. If he is satisfied with only regretting me when he might have obtained my affection and hand, I shall soon cease to regret him at all. The surprise of the rest of the family on hearing who their visitor had been was very great, but they obligingly satisfied it with the same kind of supposition which had appeased Mrs. Bennet's curiosity, and Elizabeth was spared from much teasing on the subject. The next morning, as she was going downstairs, she was met by her father, who came out of his library with a letter in his hand. "Lizzie," he said, "I was going to look for you. Come into my room." She followed him thither, and her curiosity to know what he had to tell her was heightened by the supposition of its being in some manner connected with the letter he held. It suddenly struck her that it might be from Lady Catherine, and she anticipated with dismay all the consequent explanations. She followed her father to the fireplace, and they both sat down, and he said then, "I have received a letter this morning that has astonished me exceedingly, as it principally concerns yourself. You ought to know its contents. I did not know before that I had 2 daughters on the brink of matrimony. Let me congratulate you on this, on a very important conquest." The colour now rushed into Elizabeth's cheeks, and an instantaneous conviction of its letter being from the nephew instead of the aunt, and she was undetermined whether most to be pleased that he had explained himself at all, or offended that his letter was not rather addressed to herself, when her father continued, You look conscious. Young ladies have great pretension in such matters as these, but I think you may defer even your sagacity to discover the name of your admirer. This letter is from Mr. Collins." "From Mr. Collins? What can he have to say?" "Something very to the purpose, of course. He begins with congratulations on the approaching nuptials of my eldest daughter, which it seems he has been told by some of the good-natured gossiping Lucases. I shall not sport with your intelligence by reading what he says on that point. What relates to yourself, however, is as follows. Having thus offered the sincere congratulations of Mrs. Collins and myself on this happy event, let me now add a short hint on the subject of another, of which we have been advertised by the same authority. Your daughter Elizabeth, it is presumed, will not long bear the name of Bennet, after her eldest sister has resigned it, and the chosen partner of her fate might be reasonably looked on to one of the most illustrious personages in the land. Can you possibly guess, Lizzie, who is meant by this? This young gentleman is blessed in a peculiar way with everything the heart of a mortal can desire. Splendid property, noble kindred, and extensive patronage. Yet, in spite of all these temptations, let me warn my cousin Elizabeth and yourself what evils may occur by a precipitous closure with this gentleman's proposals, which of course you will be inclined to take immediate advantage of. Have you any idea, Lizzie, who this gentleman is? But now it comes out. My motive for cautioning you is as follows. We have reason to imagine that his aunt, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, does not look on the match with a friendly eye. Mr. Darcy, you see, is the man. Now, Lizzie, I have surprised you. Could he or the Lucases have pitched on any man with the circle of our acquaintance whose name would have given the lie more effectively to what they related? Mr. Darcy, who never looks at a woman but to see a blemish, and who probably never looked at you in his life. It is admirable. Elizabeth tried to join in her father's pleasantry, but could only force one most reluctant smile. Never had his wit been more directed in a manner so little agreeable to her. Are you not diverted? Pray, yes, please read on. After mentioning the likelihood of this marriage to her ladyship last night, she immediately, with her unusual condescension, expressed what she felt on the occasion, when it became apparent that on the score of some family obligations on the part of my cousin, she would never give her consent to what she deemed a disgraceful match. I thought it my duty to give the speediest intelligence of this to my cousin, that she and her noble admirer may be aware of what they are about, and not run hastily into a marriage which has not been properly sanctioned. Mr. Collins moreover adds, I am truly rejoiced that my cousin Lydia's sad business has been so well hushed up, and that I am only concerned that their living together before marriage took place should be so generally known. I must not, however, neglect the duties of my station, or refrain from declaring my amazement at hearing you received the young couple in your house as soon as they were married. It was an encouragement of vice, and had I been the rector of Longbourn, I should have very strenuously have opposed it. You ought certainly to forgive them as a Christian, but never to admit them in your sight, or allow their names to be mentioned in your hearing. That is his notion of Christian forgiveness. The rest of his letter is about his dear Charlotte's situation, and his expectations of a young olive branch. But, Lizzie, you look as if you did not enjoy it. You're not going to be missish, I hope, and pretend to be affronted at an idle report. What do we live for but to make sport for our neighbours and laugh at them in our turn? Oh, cried Elizabeth, I am excessively diverted, but it is so strange. Yes, that is what makes it amusing. Had they fixed on any other man, it would have been nothing. But he is perfectly indifferent, and your point of dislike. It makes it so delightfully absurd. Much as I abominate writing, I would not give up Mr. Collins' correspondence for any consideration. Nay, when I read a letter of his, I cannot help giving him the preference over Wickham. Much as I value the imprudence and hypocrisy of my son-in-law. And pray, Lizzie, what did Lady Catherine say about this report? Did she call to refuse her consent? To this question his daughter replied only with a laugh, and as it had been asked without the least suspicion, she was not distressed by his repeating it. Elizabeth had never been more at a loss to make her feelings appear what they were not. It was necessary to laugh when she would rather have cried. Her father had most cruelly mortified her by what he said of Mr. Darcy's indifference, and she could do nothing but wonder at such a want of penetration, or fear that perhaps instead of his seeing too little, she might have fancied too much. Oh dear. That's actually one of my favorite lines. What do we live for but to make sport for our neighbours and laugh at them in our turn? That's one of my favorite lines in literature. Okay. And now, my friends, we come to chapter 58. Instead of receiving any such letter of excuse from his friend as Elizabeth half expected Mr. Bingley to do, he was able to bring Mr. Darcy himself with him to Longbourn before many days had passed, after Lady Catherine's visit. The gentleman arrived early, and before Mrs. Bennet had time to tell of their having seen his aunt, of which her daughter sat in momentary dread, Bingley, who wanted to be alone with Jane, proposed their all walking out. It was agreed to. Mrs. Bennet was not in the habit of walking. Mary could never spare time, but the remaining 5 set off together. Bingley and Jane, however, soon allowed others to outstrip them. They lagged behind, while Elizabeth, Kitty, and Darcy were to entertain each other. Very little was said by either. Kitty was too much afraid of him to talk. Elizabeth was secretly forming a desperate resolution, and perhaps he might be doing the same. They walked towards the Lucases because Kitty wished to call upon Maria, and as Elizabeth saw no occasion for making it a general concern, when Kitty left them, she went boldly on with him alone. Now was the moment for her resolution to be executed, and while her courage was high, she immediately said, "Mr. Darcy, I am a very selfish creature, and for the sake of giving relief to my own feelings, care not how much I may be wounding yours. I can no longer help thanking you for your unexampled kindness to my poor sister. Ever since I have known it, I have been most anxious to acknowledge how grateful I feel. Were it known to the rest of my family, I should not have merely my own gratitude to express." "I am sorry, exceedingly sorry," replied Darcy in a tone of surprise and emotion, that you have been informed of what may, in a mistaken life, have given you uneasiness. I did not think Mrs. Gardiner was so little to be trusted. You must not blame my aunt. Lydia's thoughtlessness first betrayed to me that you had been concerned in the matter, and of course I could not rest until I knew all the particulars. Let me thank you again and again, in the name of my family, for that generous compassion which induced you to take so much trouble and bear so many mortifications for the sake of discovering them." "If you will thank me," he replied, "let it be for yourself alone. That the wish of giving happiness to you might add force to the other inducements which led me on, I shall not attempt to deny. But your family owes me nothing, much as I respect them. I believe I thought only of you." Elizabeth was too much embarrassed to say a word. After a short pause, her companion added, "You are too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes are unchanged, but one word from you will silence me on the subject forever." Elizabeth, feeling all the more common awkwardness and anxiety for his situation, now forced herself to speak, and immediately, though not very fluently, gave him to understand that her sentiments had undergone so material a change since the period to which he alluded, as to make her receive with gratitude and pleasure his present assurances. The happiness which this reply produced was such as he had probably never felt before, and he expressed himself on the occasion as sensibly and as warmly as a man violently in love can be supposed to do. Had Elizabeth been able to encounter his eye, she might have seen how well the expression of heartfelt delight diffusing his face became him. But though she could not look, she could listen, and be told of his feelings. He told her of his feelings, which, in proving what importance she was to him, made his affection every moment more valuable. They walked on without knowing in what direction. There was too much to be thought and felt and said for attention to any other objects. She soon learned that though they were indebted for their present good understanding to the efforts of his aunt, who did call on him in her return journey through London, and there relate her journey to Longbourn, its motives, and the substance of her conversation with Elizabeth, dwelling emphatically on every expression of the latter, which in her ladyship's apprehension peculiar denoted her perverseness and assurance in the belief that such a relation must assist her endeavours to obtain that promise from her nephew, which she had refused to give. But, unluckily for her ladyship, its effect had been exactly contrariwise. "It taught me to hope," said he, "as I scarcely ever allowed myself to hope before. I knew enough of your disposition to be certain that had you absolutely irrevocably decided against me, you would have acknowledged it to Lady Catherine frankly and openly." Elizabeth coloured and laughed as she replied, Yes, you know enough of my frankness to believe me capable of that. After abusing you so abominably to your face, I could have no scruple in abusing you to all your relations. What did you say of me that I did not deserve? For though your accusations were ill-founded, formed on mistaken premise, my behaviour to you at the time had merited the severest reproof. It was unpardonable. I cannot think of it without abhorrence. We will not quarrel for the greater share of blame annexed to that evening, said Elizabeth. The conduct of neither, if strictly examined, will be irreproachable, but since then we have both, I hope, improved in civility. I cannot be so easily reconciled myself. The recollection of what I said then, of my conduct, my manners, my expression during the whole of it, is now, and has been many months, inexpressibly painful to me. Your reproof, so well applied, I shall never forget, had you behaved in a more gentlemanlike manner. Those were your words. You know not, you cannot sincerely conceive how they have tormented me. Though it was some time, I confess, before I was reasonable enough to allow their justice. I was certainly very far from expecting them to have so strong an impression. I had not the smallest idea of their being ever felt in such a way. I can easily believe it. You thought me devoid of every proper feeling. I am sure you did. The turn of your countenance I shall not forget, as you said that I could not have addressed you in any possible way that would have induced you to accept me. Oh, do not repeat what I said then. These recollections will not do at all. I assure you that I have long been most heartily ashamed of it. Darcy mentioned his letter. Did it, he said, did it soon make you think better of me? Did you, on reading it, give any credit to its contents? She explained what effect on her it had been, on how gradually all her former prejudices had been removed. I knew, he said, that what I wrote must give you pain, but it was necessary. I hope you destroyed the letter. There was one part, especially the opening of it, which I should dread you have the power of reading again. I can remember some expressions which might justly make you hate me. The letter shall be burnt if you believe it essential to the preservation of my regard. But though we have both reason to think my opinions were not entirely unalterable, they were not. They are not, I hope, quite so easily changed as that implies. When I wrote the letter, replied Darcy, I believed myself perfectly cool and calm, but I am since convinced that it was written in a dreadful bitterness of spirit. The letter perhaps began in bitterness, but it did not end so. The adieu is charity itself. But think no more of the letter. The feelings of the person who wrote and the person who received it are now so widely different from what they have been, that every unpleasant circumstance attending it ought to be forgotten. You must learn some of my philosophy. Think only of the past as remembrance gives you pleasure. I cannot give you credit for any philosophy of the kind. Your retrospections must be totally void of reproach. That the contentment arising from them is not of philosophy, but what is much better, of ignorance. But with me it is not so. Painful recollections will intrude, which ought not to be repelled. I have been a selfish being all my life, in practice, though not in principle. As a child, I was taught what was right, but I was not taught to correct my temper. I was given good principles, but left to follow them in pride and conceit. Unfortunately, an only son, and for many years an only child, I was spoilt by my parents, who, though good themselves, as my father particularly in all that was benevolent and amiable, allowed and encouraged, almost taught me to be selfish and overbearing, to care for none beyond my own family circle, to think meanly of the rest of the world, to wish, at least, to think meanly of their sense and worth compared with my own. Such I was, from 8 to 28, and such I might still have been, but for you, dearest, lovelinest Elizabeth. What do I not owe you? You taught me a lesson, hard indeed at first, but most advantageous. By you I was properly humbled. I came to you without a doubt of my reception. You showed me how insufficient were all my pretensions to please a woman so worthy of being pleased. Had you then persuaded yourself that I should? Indeed I had. What will you think of my vanity? I believe you to be wishing, expecting my addresses. My manners must have been at fault, but not intentionally, I assure you. I never meant to deceive you, but my spirits must often lead me wrong. How you must have hated me after that evening. Hate you? I was angry perhaps at first, but my anger soon began to take its proper direction. I'm almost afraid of asking you what you thought of me when we met at Pemberley. You blamed me for coming? No, indeed. I felt nothing but surprise. Your surprise could not be greater than mine in being noticed by you. My conscience told me that I deserved no extraordinary politeness, and I confess that I did not expect to receive more than my due. My object then, replied Darcy, was to show you by every civility in my power that I was not so mean as to resent the past, and I hoped to obtain your forgiveness, to lesser your ill opinion, by letting you see that your reproofs had been attended to. How soon any other wish introduced themselves I can hardly tell, but I believe in about half an hour after seeing you. He then told her of Georgiana's delight in her acquaintance, and of her disappointment at its sudden interruption, which was naturally leading to the cause of that interruption. She soon learnt that his resolution of following her from Derbyshire in quest of her sister had been formed before he quitted the inn, and that his gravity and thoughtfulness there had arisen from no other struggles than what such purpose must comprehend. She expressed her gratitude again, but it was too painful a subject to each to be dwelt on farther. After walking several miles in a leisurely fashion, and too busy to know anything about it, they found at last, on examining their watches, that it was time to be home. What could have become of Mr. Bingley and Jane, was wondered, which was introduced the discussion of their affairs. Darcy was delighted with their engagement. His friend had given him the earliest information of it. I must ask whether you were surprised. Not at all. When I went away, I felt it would soon happen. That is to say, you had given your permission? I guessed as much. And though he exclaimed at the term, she found that it had been pretty much the case. On the evening before my going to London, he said, I made a confession to him which I believe ought to have been made long ago. I told him of all that had occurred to make my former interference in his affairs absurd and impertinent. His surprise was great. He had never had the slightest suspicion. I told him, moreover, that I believed myself mistaken in supposing, as I had done, that your sister was indifferent to him. And as I could easily perceive that his attachment to her was unabated, I felt no doubt of their happiness together. Elizabeth could not help smiling at his easy manner of directing his friend. You speak from your own observations, said, when you told him that my sister loved him, or merely from my information last spring. From the former. I had narrowly observed her during the 2 visits which I had made lately here, and I was convinced of her affection. And your assurance of it, I suppose, carried immediate conviction to him? It did. Bingley is most unaffectedly modest. His diffidence has prevented his depending on his own judgment in so anxious a case. But his reliance on mine made everything easy. I was obliged to confess one thing from which for a time, and not unjustly, offended him. I could not allow myself to conceal that your sister had been in town 3 months last winter, and that I had known it, and purposely kept it from him. He was angry, but his anger, I am persuaded, lasted no longer than he remained in any doubt of your sister's sentiment. He has heartily forgiven me now. Elizabeth longed to observe that Mr. Bingley had been a most delightful friend, so easily guided that his worth was invaluable, but she checked herself. She remembered that he had yet to learn to be laughed at, and it was rather too early to begin. Okay, am I back? Are you seeing me? Did I finish the chapter before the OBS decided to do the thingy? Is it still frozen? Are we back? Too early to begin. Okay. Is it working? I think it's working. Okay. In anticipation of the happiness of Bingley, which of course was to be inferior to his own, he continued the conversation until they reached the house. In the hall they parted. So, we have 3 chapters to go, which we will finish tomorrow. But yay! They finally got their shit together. Yeah. So that is, it's a lovely chapter. I admit I rather enjoy the Lady Catherine chapter more, but that's because it's funny. But no, it's lovely that they managed to get out of their own way and have them now admitted their love for one another. So yes, I hope you all had fun. And we will see you tomorrow for the final installment of this. And happy Easter. Have a great week. Okay.